Good evening. What would be the impact on Scotland of a so-called hard Brexit? Well, today the Scottish Government unveiled its own analysis and claimed that leaving the EU with no trade deals could eventually see more than £12 billion wiped off the economy. However, the Scottish Conservatives described that figure as completely over-the-top scaremongering. The analysis also dealt with immigration and called for the continued free movement of people. Here's our political editor, Brian Taylor.
Welcome to Crieff Hydro, an oasis of placid calm.
Hello, Polly.
But the boss here is anxious.
So, full tonight?
He depends heavily on EU migrant staff and worries that Brexit might cause obstacles in future.
Put simply, we'd be in trouble. We're reliant on something like 1 in 5 people who work in our company to come from Europe, and we want these folk to feel welcome when they come to Scotland and work hard for us, and they want to work hard for us.
In the Hydro's cafe, Robert Borzagi, a Romanian. He's worked in Scotland for 9 years. He loves it here, but Brexit has him worried too.
Thinking of your future, you're not too sure anymore. I have gone ahead and applied for the citizenship right now, just to be on the safe side. Because, they said if we go out of the union, nobody knows what your rights is going to be.
Nicola Sturgeon campaigned to remain in the European Union. She says she's trying to reduce the damage done. So, accept for now that Britain is leaving the EU. The question is how. Could the UK stay in the European single market like Norway? That means the free movement of goods, services, capital and people. Or could the Prime Minister reach a Canada-style trade deal with the EU, removing tariffs on most goods? Today's Scottish paper examines 3 scenarios for leaving the EU. It says that maintaining membership of the European single market would still reduce Scotland's overall economy by £4 billion by 2030. A Canada-style free trade agreement with Europe would cut the economy by £9 billion. Worst of all, according to the Scottish Government, is leaving with no deal and resorting to World Trade Organisation rules. That would cost Scotland £12.7 billion a year.
So it's clear from these figures that staying in the single market does not insulate us from the costs of leaving the EU, but it will minimise those costs. The weight of evidence in favour of staying in the single market is compelling, and I believe that there is a majority there to be harnessed that can achieve at least that outcome.
The UK government sees today's paper as unhelpful.
Anybody can make end-of-the-world type predictions, but rather than focusing on the most negative scenario, what we should be doing is working together to get the best possible deal, a deal that allows us barrier, tariff-free access to European markets, but also allows us to take advantage of the many opportunities that Brexit can bring with other markets around the world.
Back in Crieff, they're listening as the Tories segue smoothly into warning against Scottish independence. Nicola Sturgeon says that's a future option, while Brexit is an immediate threat.
Well, we'll be speaking to our Westminster correspondent David Porter in just a moment, but first our political editor Brian Taylor is at Holyrood for us this evening. Brian, as we heard from Nicola Sturgeon, the point of this analysis is to reaffirm her hopes to stay in the single market. Is there any likelihood of this?
It's a tough one, Jackie. I mean, of course, Nicola Sturgeon wants to stay in the European Union as an independent Scottish nation, but you're right, the objective in this paper here, setting out, is membership of the single market. She wants to assemble popular support for that, business support for that, but in practice, if it's going to happen, it has to be political support here at Holyrood and above all at Westminster. And it'll have to be a cross-party if it is to work at all. The Liberal Democrats are on board for that, but the Conservatives, the Prime Minister says no. She set her face against membership of the single market. Why so? Because it involves free movement of people, otherwise known as immigration, and that's one of the principal reasons that many people voted against membership of the European Union in the first place. As for Labour, they castigate the Conservative approach. They say they are in favour of jobs, but they are not convinced. They are not currently advocating membership of the single market. They talk about access, and they say that the Conservative approach is damaging to jobs and to workers' rights, but they have yet to be convinced that it has to be stressed by membership of the single market.
Well, let's go to David Porter now. Thank you, Brian. David, what's been the reaction to this at Westminster, and will it have any impact at all on the EU negotiations?
Well, Jackie, as so often down here, the tone of the reaction depends how you stand on Brexit in the first place. I think it's fair to say that those who were on the Remain side wanted to stay within the European Union will regard what the Scottish Government has produced as a useful document. It will show in black and white and pounds, shillings and pence what Brexit could mean. Those on the other side of the argument, those who always wanted to leave the European Union, say this is in effect Nicola Sturgeon's own version of Project Fear, referring back to documents put out by the then Chancellor of the Exchequer, George Osborne, when he was Chancellor in the EU referendum debate, saying basically that it was all going to be horrible when Brexit came about. They say that Nicola Sturgeon is doing what George Osborne did a couple of years ago. I think it is fair to say, though, from the UK government's perspective, that they regard this document as unhelpful. They say it will not be helpful when the UK embarks on the second round of negotiations with the EU countries to have a constituent part of the UK making one argument, although they do say that Theresa May has always made it perfectly clear that she will be negotiating on behalf of the whole of the UK, not one single part of the UK. They also raise a further point. They say that this document almost concentrates on Scotland's relationship with the EU, when in economic terms, the really important relationship is between Scotland and the rest of the UK, not the EU.
David Porter and Brian Taylor, thank you.